Hey, it's Kellen. And today, you guys, you're in for a treat. I think after this interview, you are going to feel, no matter how you feel, you're going to feel enlightened. You're going to feel encouraged. My guest today is Seconde Nimenya. And that last name is almost, it takes me back to like Tupac. Only God knows. Only God can judge me. It just flips off that. She is an author, a speaker, TED Talk speaker at that. She spoke on all type of platforms, news platforms, Voices of America. She has her MBA and she is from Burundi. And so you're going to get a probably geographical lesson where you're going to want to go check out where's Burundi if you don't know, especially if you're in America. Geography is not always a strong suit. Her website is in the description box. Seconde, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Karen, for having me. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning. I was listening to your book, the Evolving book, not the because you have two books out there.
I have four, actually. Sorry.
4 books. Okay.
Yes.
And I was just like, just taking back the stories. I always love to hear these stories of folks who have not just immigrated to one country, but to, a few. And I always want to know, like, okay, you're in Canada, which sometimes we say is a happier North America. And then to come to America,
Yes.
tell me about your journey and your purpose in your writings and speaking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And like you said, my name is Seconde Nimenya, and I'm originally from Burundi, which is a small country in East Africa. I immigrated to North America in the 90s. I started living in Canada, where I became a refugee, and I lived there for about 10 years or more, and I moved to the United States. And it's always been, my passion to share stories, because stories really define us in the way we use them. We can choose to use them as, to thrust us on our journeys, or we can choose to use them in get down on ourselves. So I try to use my story, my adversities, to help others, because I know, on this adventure we call life, I'm not the only one who goes through adversity. So my first book is called Evolving Through Adversity, the one you read. And in that book, I wanted to share my story from the time I was a baby, all the adversities I went through, the challenges of getting an education in a country and a culture back in that time when I was growing up. Education for girls was not encouraged. So I shared that journey, how I fought to get an education. Then I came to North America and I became a refugee. And it was a whole different animal when you're uprooted from your own culture, from your country. You leave everything behind that you knew, and you have to start over. So getting uprooted, it's not fun. So there were more adversities I had to go through as a refugee, as an immigrant woman, and as a mother, as a wife. So I went through all that, and then I shared in the book, knowing that other people have gone through adversity, but we can overcome if we come together. That's the basis of my message, is really to bring people together, no matter our differences, no matter our backgrounds. We all go through adversity one way or another, at one time or another. And we have to learn how to overcome. So that's what I shared in that book. And my other books, I have a novel titled A Hand to Hold. it's a fiction book, but in the book I also share really how to overcome adversity. That's always been what I want people to get from my writing, my speaking. I also talk about diversity and inclusion when I'm, sharing insights with the organizational leaders. How can you improve your workplace and be more inclusive? Because we come from all walks of life with different stories, different experiences, but how can we be more tolerant and more inclusive? Because that's going to increase your bottom line as a business leader. Yeah.
And your first book, for all the differences that people have, there's so many similarities. I remember the story about, you being a young girl and the tadpoles. And the story was, folks, just to give you a little tease, if the
Yeah.
tadpoles bit your breast would grow. But that same story is in
Yes.
shows like The Cosby Show, and you can see like when, Rudy and Vanessa were, dealing with that. And I remember, so many different stories. My wife told me one where in Cameroon, they
Yeah.
had a clinic, so-called clinic, and the
Mhm.
people, if they massaged them, they would grow. So
Oh.
these guys were actually set up a clinic
Mhm.
to rub young girls' breast. And I said, what? That story always, like, 'cause that clinic's still open, so we can, go burn it down with the people in it. It was always my thought when she told me that almost 2 decades ago. But those stories that everyone has the same, this, we're all different, but it's similar, just coming up, and that we all can share similar backgrounds. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're different, and that's good, To be different, it's good. Can you imagine if we all looked the same, did the same thing? The world would be boring. Life would be boring. So it's okay that we are different, but at the same time, and that's what I shared in my TEDx talk, that at the same time we have more in common than what divides us. Some of the stories you just shared with us, and some of the cultural similarities around the world and across the world. There are many similarities. So when you look at it, underneath, we all want the same thing. It doesn't matter if you grew up poor or rich, if you grew up in a village or in a city, we all want the same thing. We all want to be valued for who we are, accepted for who we are, and know that we matter and what we do matters. Yeah.
Yes, and that there's good, bad, and indifferent. Where I find it, for immigrants coming in, especially from the continent of Africa, or if you're coming from Asia, people have in America, and 70% of Americans don't have passports. So when I talk about the geography and not knowing and being ignorant, but a lot of times people will say things, especially men, and say, "Oh, Asian women are this." They think they're, so submissive. Or you might think some African women are so submissive. But until you get to know someone, I tell people all the time, maybe because you don't understand Mandarin or Cantonese, you think Asian women are submissive. But I said, I know some that are spitfires, just like anyone else you could imagine from, Harlem or Oakland or whatever. So it's just funny how people try to put people in a box. Can you talk about when you came to North America? What did you feel like you had to fit in this mold?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There was an expectation of fitting in, and the whole integration journey in a different culture, in a different country, um, represents so many challenges for me and for so many other immigrants, where you kind of are expected to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to ignore your original culture and just adopt this new culture. And there are, pros and cons. And I always tell immigrants that, it's good to have this dichotomy of culture, even in the way we raise our children, using our original culture. What's good in there? Take the good from your original culture and take the goods in your new culture, in your new home, and mix and match, and then just use the best. So you don't have to fit a certain mold. You can be all of those things, and that's what really America represents when you look at it. We come from all different countries, all different cultures and background, and we come to America. And when I was in high school, we learned that the United States was a melting pot, and it's only when I lived here that I realized what that meant. Yeah.
And that can be a good thing, bad thing. I've met people who are, especially in the younger days, people who are party animals, and they were partying back home in Africa.
Yeah.
They were partying back, Europe, and then they come here and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do the same thing, not understanding that here things can be a little different. There's no police that we can pay appreciation, sometimes I call it. Not, I don't like to use the other words. People say things are so corrupt everywhere else, and it's just how much money do you have sometimes. But you find that America, for many immigrants, they're trying to play this game, and I've seen some that were straight up criminals, right? From different countries, and they come here and they actually are like, wait, I can't go to an American jail, they'll put me there for life. So it can straighten you out. It just depends on where you are in life. How about for your children, and how do they take it? Do they say, okay, I am an African, I am a Canadian, I am an American? Like, what's that balance, and how do you train them?
Yeah, and that's really been a challenge for us parents and for them, the children, because you go to a school, for instance, in the United States, and you come with this background. My children, they identify as Africans. At the same time, they were my two youngest were born in Canada, so they identify also as Canadians, and we came as Canadian citizens to the United States, and we became American citizens. So all this background is a good thing, but at the same time represents a challenge if you're not how can I put this? If you're not safe enough in yourself to know that I can be all those backgrounds and still be me, and still be a person of integrity, because at the end of the day, it's not about what country you live in, it's who you're living with. I've lived in different communities, both in Canada and the US, and I found some people accepting of my identities, some not so accepting. So I had to navigate, and my children have done the same. And I always tell them, you can be all of the above, and it's a good thing, and meet someone who's only lived in one community, in one neighborhood, and still be friends. So it doesn't prevent you from connecting with people from other backgrounds. Yeah.
And can you explain for some of the audience, they might say, what's the difference between, being a Canadian and being a U.S., child, whatnot? What are some of the differences?
Believe it or not, that's one of the questions I always get. And, people, I think sometimes they would just want to know, where is it better to live? Is it easier to live in Canada, or is it easier to live in the US? But wherever you live first with yourself, and people are people. If we go in the social systems, for instance, the way we connect as Africans. We come from collective societies where, you know, people help people, and that has its pros and cons as well, trust me. But at the same time, we want to learn how to look out for ourselves. For example, you know, if you're a business person, how are you going to climb to the ladder? And that represents challenges in both countries. It's easier if maybe you're talking about healthcare, it's easy in Canada than it is in the US. But when you talking about living and thriving in both countries, you can thrive, you can live, and you can you know, accomplish your purpose. But it's going to have challenges. Everything, there's nothing that's easy in life, but everything that's worthwhile, you're going to work hard either way in either country. Yeah.
Well, culturally though, and I'm gonna push on this question because
Yeah.
you said you get asked a lot. You know, the
Yes.
healthcare. Okay, what about as far as feeling welcomed as an immigrant, and you know, safety wise, and especially for, you know, people just coming in. I mean, you've seen the dance your kids have had to do,
Mm-hmm.
but and if there's not much of a difference, you know, for the kids, where kids can be kids wherever they're at, you know, safety wise, I always think, okay, Canada's a lot safer. The
Mm-hmm.
most, you know, I've been yelled at in Canada, and jokingly I say it's the person was, you know, yelling, get out the way or something like that. That wasn't it. But, you know, as far as comfort level,
Mm-hmm.
is there a big cultural difference? Because I think I'm biased as an American.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when I
Mm-hmm.
run over to Vancouver, I'm like, oh
Yes.
man, things are so, you know, peaceful.
Yes, and it's peaceful. It's peaceful in Canada. In most parts of Canada, really, uh, it's peaceful, and it's an accepting society. But at the same time, it depends where you live. For instance, in and when you lived there, I came to Canada in the 90s, and it was still a time when immigrants were seen as the other. Things have improved so much more in Canada than it was in the 90s. And initially lived in Quebec, and you know, Quebec at that time was trying to actually separate from the rest of Canada. And I remember during the referendum to separate Quebec from Canada, there was a no, you know, no, not separation, and a yes for separation. And the no narrowly really won against the yes. And I remember the premier of that time, his name was Jacques Parizeau of Quebec. Uh, in his concession speech, say blaming basically immigrants, because you know most immigrants who could vote at that time voted against the separation, obviously, because you know most immigrants came as refugees in Canada, and they came from countries in strife, in wars. We didn't want to see another, you know, separation or strife. So obviously they voted against the separation, and they were blamed for that. But this is to tell you that it depends when you lived in Canada, and you know where. Some communities were more accepting of immigrants because they were more exposed to them, especially in big cities like Toronto. You said Vancouver, same thing, but things have changed since I lived there as well. And when you come to the US, I mean, it also depends on the community. In the community where you live, I lived in different, you know, I lived in Quebec, not Quebec. I lived in Detroit when Detroit, in the Detroit area. And even there, some communities were more accepting than others. So you kind of, as an immigrant, basically, you have to navigate all these experiences, all these communities, and find a place where for yourself. You're not gonna feel 100% welcome everywhere, and also you have to learn how to accept people for who they are, understand where they're coming from, why are they behaving the way they behave, and that's been my gift in sharing these stories, and trying to understand where people are coming from, and showing them that, you know, we're not that different. If you look underneath our skin colors, or, you know, accents and weird names and all that. So yeah, that's what I've been able to share.
And do you, I mean, when Quebec was trying to, do that, were you at all nervous? Because also coming from a country, Burundi, and you talked about it in your book of,
Mhm.
the different conflicts and wars that have happened. I
Yeah.
know being in Cameroon and going to the English side, and they're shooting at, down the road, and we see the military come to the hotel. But I said, wait, one shot, two shots? I grew up in the Bay Area, Oakland, in the 80s.
Mhm.
I'm not worried about one shot, two shots. That's a
Yeah.
great day in a lot of American cities. So does it
Mhm.
even make you nervous when you're in Quebec and say, I hope they don't break out into war, or when you're living in Detroit and say, I know what real, violence looks like
Mhm.
firsthand.
Yes.
Do you, I mean, what's your standpoint? What do you think?
Yeah, of course you get nervous because, you know, you came for to live in peace. That's why you immigrate. That's why you left your country. So I was nervous, obviously, when Quebec was trying to separate from Canada, but at the same time, I didn't think there would be a war per se. But when I lived in the Detroit area, you know, you watch TV, and channel, I can't remember if it was 7 or what, the evening news was always about shootings, shootings, shootings. So it was really nerve-wracking knowing that, wow, this is one of the richest countries in the world. This is the United States of America, and these things are happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities. So that really puts things into perspective, that humans, you know, we all have this human condition, and we better work on ourselves, and you know, help our communities basically uh, get out of those predicaments, and get out of those uh, that mindset of always thinking, you know, killing is the solution, or you know, eliminating the other will make me richer, or whatever the reason might be. Yeah.
And I want to stress, being from Burundi and coming and immigrating, and then getting your MBA and writing books, and having your evolving podcast that everybody can go check out on all the platforms. You can go from one platform to another, however you want to listen to it, even on YouTube. But
Yes.
it's that you're never content, and you have your family, you're juggling that, you have your husband. How do keep everything in line? Because I find that a lot of women, especially African women, sometimes
Mhm.
are, there's relatives, there's husbands that will say, no, you don't have to do that. What are you trying to prove? Going to get your MBA. What are you trying to prove? Trying to write another book. or what are you trying to prove with the podcast? And instead of pushing someone just to try and taste everything, it's, put people in a box. And that might not just be true for African women, but I put that focus because that's where it comes out. And it bothers me every time to say, why would you not want another Oprah? Why would you not want another, Daniel Steele? Let people write.
Which was my first author, Danielle Steele. I love to read her books. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to put things on hold. As a younger wife and a younger mother, I put things on hold to help my family, basically to raise my kids. And I didn't thrive that much in the workplace because I was torn between motherhood and going to climb the corporate ladder. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I always knew one day I would do this, what I'm doing today. I would write books, I would speak, I would share. That was always in the back of my mind. And when it happened, what I liked about my husband was he was really supportive of me doing this. And like everyone who's an entrepreneur or a sole business owner, the journey, it's not easy, especially the first 3-4 years was hard, but it was encouraging. And my kids are now adult children, so they're grown, so that gives me plenty of time to really work on me, work on my purpose, and be able to do what I'm doing. So I'm grateful for that.
Okay. I didn't know that your children were, that grown. What black doesn't crack if you take care of it. So,
well, thank you.
Yes, and that's for everybody. We live in an area that has dispensaries on every corner, and I am not for people going to jail for doing whatever they want, but I'm just seeing people coming out of Amazon, Microsoft, all these places, just getting high every chance they can. And I said, I thought this was even if it's your medication, you go in the morning, you can go at night, but during the day and you're 60 years old or you're smoking with the 20-year-old, it's just kind of, I said, what do I live in? Is this Babylon? Because you can't function to your highest degree on any substance all the time. Even if you like to just sip wine, you can't sip it all day, every day. So, when you take care of it is what I want to stress to the people. Right. If you abuse your body, hey, you will not look like this when you have adult children. You might look like, whatnot. But that goes kind of into your coaching platform. And I want you to talk about your coaching and what you do as a coach and what people need to reach out to you. Because everyone has sometimes a focus. And so is it life? Is it business? What is it?
So basically, as I shared in the beginning, the basis of my coaching is also the theme I write about, which is how can we evolve? How can we evolve not only as individuals, but as businesses, as organizations? So I share, when I'm talking to school leaders, for example, how can they make sure that they are an evolving school, so to speak, that welcomes every student from different backgrounds and is inclusive, is a good school to go to? How do they attract their students? And I do the same if I'm talking to organizational leaders. How can you be the best workplace? how do you keep your employees engaged and satisfied? And if I'm coaching individuals, it's also about your personal and professional leadership transformation. So I give them insights and, help them gain new perspectives, maybe something you didn't think about. Then through a different lens, you can see that, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And then it will help you really, it will spark your mind to see yourself differently, to work differently, and to be more of yourself and fulfill your fullest potential as an individual, as a business, as a as an organization. So that's what I do when I'm coaching, when I'm speaking in live events. Same thing, yeah.
Okay, and you guys hear that. So if you reach out to her, the coaches get paid. So please
Yes,
don't.
they do.
Yes, and so always lead with I'm interested in coaching, and ask about the fees to make sure you've saved enough pennies to have a proper coach. I just find it interesting. People sometimes call, not sometimes, every week,
Yeah.
if not every, and I've created systems to avoid some of that.
Yeah.
With automatic text, but I'm sure you get this all the time where people say, "Oh, I want to be coached." That you, oh, that's great, that's great, and then you say, "Okay, well, this is what it's going to cost," and they
Yes.
say, "Wait, cost? Could you just help me?" And I mean, my consulting and PR is even in faith-based, so, and I've written books on the whole entertainment in Christian music and movies, and people say, "Well, God told me." No. We don't lead. Don't lead with God told you. That's going to lead for me doing something for free. Please
Oh, wow.
don't say that, because I'm going to rebuke you in
Yes.
the name of Jesus. But do you get that? And how do you deal with that? Because you're so calm, so relaxed, so cool. How do you deal with people that will try to take advantage of your, professional services?
Kellen, I view that as actually an honor. Excuse me. It's an honor to be able to, come in a space where you can share something, you can share an experience that can uplift someone else. So if someone needs help, I'm going to look at the different ways I can help them. It could mean maybe I relate to their story. So I'm going to send them my book. Read this book, and if you still need help, then we can talk. We can see how I can help you. Sometimes, yes, I want to get paid, but at the same time, I also want to help. And if you value your life, you're not gonna mind paying for your coaching session, because the best investment you can do is in yourself. This has been my personal experience, because I had to invest in myself to evolve. And so I could help someone else. I could be an inspiration to a young girl somewhere in the world. So I think people neglect to invest in themselves and think that things are just going to go into place. Because if I give it free to you, you're not going to value it as much as if you paid for it, because what we value, we don't mind, buying. If you love a dress, and especially women, or shoes, you don't mind paying the high price, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's the value. So I'm going to show you the value you can get from it, and then you will decide for yourself if you value yourself enough to buy it.
And feel free, if you need to grab some water, grab some water. I, yeah,
Yeah.
I like that, because I think every coach, every mentor, every whatever you want to call people
Mm-hmm.
who help people.
Yeah.
We've given enough away for free, and we're going to continue to do that just because in
Mm-hmm.
your everyday life, that's who you are.
Yeah.
What they have to understand with a coach like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
coaches have to take time. They have to make sure you come to practice. They have to make sure you're ready for the real game. So how could you expect someone to put that time into you? And if you
Mm-hmm.
just want a quick word of advice, I mean, you have that just as a believer to just give that to people. Even if you're a heathen, heathens give that, advice. Um,
Yes.
but you got to expect more when you're coming to a professional.
Right.
Um, I I want to ask you about Burundi,
Yeah.
and do you get to go back to Burundi? Have you been back? What is your connection now with Burundi? Is there still, maybe do you have land investment? Just because we see with the year of return in Ghana, and
Mm-hmm.
we've just brought 30 people a few months ago to Kenya.
Oh, wow.
Black Americans are hungry for Africa. The
Yeah.
Chinese have always been there. Certain travelers that are non-Black have always gone to Africa, but now Black Americans are finally waking up in droves and saying, wow, we can go to Africa.
Oh, yes.
And they're
Yeah.
always looking for a connection. So tell
Mm-hmm.
us about Burundi and its current state.
So, Burundi currently, so they're going to another election, and unfortunately, each election year in Burundi has been a challenging time for the people of Burundi. So that's the issue with some of the African countries because of these dictators that we have as leaders. So it's currently really not in a good place, either economically or socially. But I went last year. This year actually in the summer I was there. I still have family there, and so I go to visit. And both my parents passed away now, but I still have my siblings and their families there. So socially, it used to be such a beautiful country, and it is a beautiful country when you look at the landscape and everything. But unfortunately, because of this political strife, it's hard to basically go and enjoy as it used to be. Um, we're talking about, Americans visiting Africa, and even us Africans, we we don't visit other countries in Africa that much. So that was always my dream to visit a different country each time I go back. And I was able to go to Tanzania, and I visited one of the parks there, the safaris there in Tanzania, which was really an amazing experience. And Africa is such a beautiful continent with such a beautiful, diverse landscape, diverse cultures, languages. It's a continent that everyone should visit and everyone should invest in. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we know governments can change like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And when they do, people, you're getting the information. You know who to contact. If you hear,
Yeah.
oh wait, things have moved, who do I know? You go back to this interview,
Mm-hmm.
you start looking, you go to her website and say, I want to invest, because folks are investing even in countries. There's investment clubs out of Togo, out of
Mm-hmm.
Kenya, out of Senegal, the Gambia, and so it's exciting to me when I'm seeing,
Yeah.
our own going there, because if not, we're
Yeah.
opening it up for everybody else. And we'll one day
Yes.
say, at least in this country, what happened, and we'll start saying injustice, and it's not injustice. You bought a $2,000 TV instead of a $2,000 ticket.
Yes.
We like to ask all of our guests, what is
Mm-hmm.
their community give back?
And say that again.
Your community give back, what do you do that's just to make sure that you're giving back? I mean, it seems your whole life, is about giving back because you're helping people evolve. But what
Mhm.
is something that you do or that you want to do even in the future,
Yeah.
just for the community?
Yeah, and I've been doing that, and mostly it's about education. For me, it's educating communities especially in Africa. There are still some communities where educating a girl is still not a priority for many families, and so because of my journey with education, so I try to inspire not only schools and girls, but also communities and organizations that work with Africans. And I went to a women's college a few years ago. I was in Rwanda, and I gave talks on leadership. I also did that at another women's college in Burundi. So my giving back is inspiring these women and young girls, especially, that yes, not only you can evolve through your adversities, but you should evolve through adversity. You to empower them to see that they have a voice. They're not just an object that someone there's just telling them that your greatest achievement is to get married and have a bunch of kids. It's not just that, and nowadays with the open borders and in terms of social media especially, girls now can have access to more information. Even this podcast of yours can be shared with them through mobile phones, and then this is how we give back. You and I are doing that right now.
Yes, yes, we definitely are. And this is what Diversified Game and your podcast is all about. So someone can listen, watch,
Mhm.
however they want to see, and become a better person. And even sometimes I think, okay, how do I get my numbers up? And I'm talking with the team, how do we get the numbers up? And then someone will contact me. Actually,
Mhm.
it just happened.
Yeah.
We hired somebody for work,
Mhm.
and I've known her. She's connected, I say, inside of our team
Ye-
family. And
yeah.
I asked her how much to do a voiceover. And she said, well, I just listened to your interview
Yeah.
with this multimillionaire, Alan Weiss. And she's like, you guys said always charge a premium price. So she gives me this price. And I said, wow, you really did listen. I mean, you listened all the way through and you've applied it, which makes me say, of course, I'll pay you that because you're listening. And I think that you're worth that. So we're
Yes.
giving back,
Mhm.
and we're doing that. And we don't like to just get the game, as we call it, from our guests. We like to give it. So I'm sending you over a text of an event that I think you'd be perfect to speak at.
Mhm.
I do it every year while I'm here. And it's 2,000 kids of color, usually that's black and brown, in
Mhm.
Everett at the
Oh,
college. And
okay.
so I just texted to you now, and you can check it out and see if that fits in your schedule,
Okay.
because they need that, more women. I mean, the conference is beautiful,
Yeah.
and everyone's welcome, but sometimes I think with our kids, they'll tell them, if you're not a good student, maybe you just need to go to the military, and that might be fine for some people,
Yeah.
but some people need to hear your story. Because
Yes.
if you can come all the way from Burundi, then do your MBA, then do everything that you're doing, you can give someone a new path. And we know
Mhm.
education is changing,
Yes.
jobs are changing. So I just want to say, I
Mhm.
thank you for coming on, and everyone check out her stuff. You will be enriched, enlightened, and you will feel better. Are there any closing words you'd like to say?
Well, besides thanking you for having me, I'd like to just add that, um, one of my sayings is everybody goes through adversity one way or another, but it's how we respond that makes the difference. So my parting words would be that, wherever you are in life, if you're experiencing any challenge, know that that's your information to grow as a person, as a professional. So take time to know who you are, take time to learn who you are, and evolve through adversities, because you are stronger than you think you are.
And on that note, you guys have got the game. Be blessed, and we're out.
Thank you so much.